The opening begins beneath the blinding Persian sun, where an empire unlike any other rose from the deserts and mountains, a civilization that fused art, mathematics, and conquest into one grand vision of power. In the heart of Persepolis, the engineers of the Achaemenid Empire bent light and stone to their will. While the Greeks carved philosophy and the Egyptians raised monuments to eternity, the Persians built systems, machines of empire designed to last forever. Their aqueducts carried life across deserts, their architecture defied scale, and their road networks stretched from the Aegean to the industry. Every invention they crafted served not just function but empire. Science was a weapon, and knowledge was loyalty to the great king. It is here, among the bronze tools and sacred fires, that whispers begin, tales of an invention so advanced that even modern historians hesitate to believe it existed. A weapon of light. A machine that could focus the sun's power into a beam strong enough to ignite enemy ships or blind entire battalions. The so-called Persian Death Ray. Yet, before the myth, there was method. Persia's scholars were not dreamers lost in mysticism. They were the mathematicians of Babylon reborn, the engineers of the East who studied optics, alchemy, and metallurgy long before these words had names in the West. Within royal workshops, guarded by silence and oath, these minds worked for one purpose: to ensure the supremacy of the empire through invention. Centuries before the word science existed, Persian thinkers mapped the heavens and measured the earth. The Magi, priests of Zoroastrian fire, were among the first to theorize about light as a divine element, pure energy born from creation itself. To them, fire was not only sacred, it was knowledge made visible. This spiritual reverence for light would intertwine with the empire's obsession with warfare. When Cyrus and Darius expanded their realms, they brought with them not only armies but engineers, builders of bridges, siege towers, and unimaginable contraptions that made conquest appear inevitable. They did not conquer with brute force alone but through the disciplined marriage of intellect and will. By the reign of Xerxes, Persia had reached the limits of the known world, yet its ambitions reached further still. Greek city-states defied Persian supremacy, their fleets challenging the empire's dominance over the sea. In this climate of tension and humiliation, whispers of a new weapon began to surface. Accounts of blinding flashes, mirrors of bronze polished to divine brilliance, and strange apparatuses mounted upon towers began circulating among travelers and traders. The Greeks would later claim these stories were myths, exaggerations told by frightened soldiers. But to the Persians, it was said to be divine fire harnessed by human hands, a reflection of Ahura Mazda's light turned into the empire's judgment upon its enemies. Archaeological fragments hint at a hidden truth. Inscriptions found near Pasargadae and Persepolis refer to workshops of shining bronze and fire that leaps by command. Ancient reliefs show what appear to be circular discs mounted upon stands, directed toward the horizon, too precise to be mere decorations. Could these have been early devices designed to focus sunlight? Could the Persians, centuries before Archimedes, have experimented with concentrated energy? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete. The empire's destruction by Alexander's forces would burn much of its knowledge to ash, leaving behind only rumors and fragments of brilliance. Yet what survives tells a consistent story. The Achaemenid world was one where science and spirituality were inseparable. The same hands that built temples to sacred fire also built machines that mimicked it. For them, mastery over nature was not heresy, it was worship. In their eyes, the flame that powered their rituals could also power their wars. And as their enemies gathered on foreign shores, Persia's greatest minds were tasked with doing the impossible, turning sunlight into a weapon. Whether through mirrors, polished shields, or chemical flame, they sought to conjure a force that would make their empire eternal. This is where the legend of the Persian Death Ray begins, not as a myth of destruction, but as a story of creation. It was the culmination of an empire's brilliance, ambition, and fear. In a world where gods were distant and empires fragile, the Persians tried to seize the very essence of divinity and hold it in their hands. What they created, or perhaps what they failed to control, would echo across centuries as one of the most mysterious lost sciences of the ancient world. And buried within their forgotten archives, behind burned tablets and shattered bronze, lies a question that still haunts historians and engineers alike. Did the Persians truly learn how to command the light of the sun? But buried within these archives of brilliance was a weapon so radical that even its existence would vanish into myth, until now. For somewhere in the sands of history, beneath the ruins of Persepolis, a forgotten fire once burned, and its story is about to be told. The story of the Persian Death Ray begins not with smoke or steel, but with legend, scattered across scrolls, fragments, and whispered accounts that refuse to die. Long after the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, Greek chroniclers, Arab alchemists, and even medieval scholars spoke of a weapon that used the very light of the sun to destroy. The first mention appears, obliquely, in later Greek writings describing flames from mirrors used by Eastern engineers. These reports, often dismissed as metaphor or exaggeration, describe an uncanny image, an array of polished bronze or crystal plates arranged in geometric precision, angled toward enemy fleets. The mirrors were said to catch the sun's fire and reflect it into concentrated beams capable of igniting wood, canvas, and flesh. The Greeks, suspicious of Persian magic and science alike, recorded such stories half in awe, half in fear. To them, Persian knowledge was dark knowledge, a blend of mysticism and mathematics they could not fully understand. Yet the concept of manipulating sunlight wasn't foreign to the ancient world. Babylonian texts referenced lenses of the gods, polished quartz used to start sacred fires. In Zoroastrian rituals, priests employed concave mirrors to summon the flame of purity without human touch. What if these spiritual practices became the seeds of experimentation, inspiring royal engineers to turn religious ceremony into military technology? The line between the sacred and the scientific was thin, and in the Achaemenid court, innovation often wore the mask of divinity. As the Persian Empire's conflicts with Greece escalated, so too did its obsession with harnessing power through nature. Historical fragments suggest that by the reign of Xerxes, royal workshops in Persepolis and Susa were experimenting with reflective alloys. Some scholars believe the bronze of the East, as it was called, possessed an unusually high polish due to tin and arsenic additives, compounds that increased reflectivity. Combined with Persian geometry and architectural mastery, this could have allowed engineers to experiment with light focusing on a scale unseen before. Modern physicists studying these alloys have found that, under ideal desert sunlight, a series of large concave mirrors could theoretically produce heat intense enough to ignite oiled wood at short range. However, other interpretations suggest something even more mysterious, that the death ray wasn't a weapon of light at all, but of fire chemistry. Persian alchemists, skilled in distillation and metallurgy, understood sulfur and naphtha. Records from later Sasanian periods describe Greek fire-like mixtures used in siege warfare, substances that clung to surfaces and burned even on water. It's possible that the original flames from mirrors referred to optical ignition, a device used to ignite volatile compounds remotely, perhaps on enemy ships or siege engines. If true, the Persian death ray may have been the world's first demonstration of controlled chemical warfare, masked in the mystique of divine fire. Arab historians centuries later preserved fragments of these ideas. In the writings of al-Biruni and later al-Tusi, there are passing references to the mirrors of light that bring forth flame without touch. Some believe these texts preserve older knowledge transmitted through Persian channels. During the Islamic Golden Age, scholars sought to reclaim and reinterpret ancient sciences, optics, astronomy, mechanics, that originated from Persia and Babylon. Among these, the study of reflected light became central to understanding the universe itself. What began as a myth about burning ships evolved into philosophical inquiry. Could light itself be harnessed, not just as illumination, but as a source of energy? The emotional heart of this legend lies in the tension between skepticism and wonder. Was it possible that an ancient empire achieved what modern science would later rediscover through mirrors, lenses, and lasers? Or was this the result of myth-making, the human instinct to see divinity in the unknown? For centuries, Western historians credited Archimedes with the invention of the solar mirror weapon, ignoring that Persian civilizations had already explored similar principles. Yet the overlap between the Archimedean, burning mirrors, and Persian descriptions is too uncanny to dismiss. Both involve arrays of polished surfaces, sunlight concentration, and claims of setting ships ablaze. It is entirely possible that Greek scholars heard of such experiments through their wars with Persia, then reimagined the technology through their own lens of heroism. But there's also a darker layer to the legend, one that touches on fear. For ancient soldiers, the sight of blazing light descending from the sky would have seemed like divine wrath. The Persians, who revered fire as a symbol of cosmic order, may have intended exactly that reaction. The death ray wasn't just meant to kill, it was meant to terrify. To blind men with the brilliance of the gods. Warfare in the ancient world was as psychological as it was physical. If an army could believe that the enemy commanded the sun itself, its courage would fracture before a single arrow was loosed. Still, behind every myth lies a shadow of truth. The Persian engineers were capable of monumental precision. The same civilization that built the royal road with mathematical exactness could align mirrors or lenses with uncanny accuracy. And in a desert where sunlight is relentless, the temptation to weaponize it would have been irresistible. Whether through optical mastery or chemical ignition, the death ray embodies a civilization's ultimate ambition, to turn the very elements into instruments of power. As centuries passed, the evidence faded, burned away by conquest and time. Yet the whispers remained, of a fire summoned not by the gods, but by human minds bold enough to try. This was no mere tale of sorcery or superstition. It was a story of human audacity, of a people who dared to look at the blinding light of creation and imagine it as a weapon. And then, as the Greek fleets advanced across the Aegean and Persia prepared for the battles that would define its fate, myth collided with the brutal realities of war. The death ray, once confined to whispers and rituals, was about to step onto the stage of history. The wars between Persia and Greece were not merely contests of empire, they were battles of civilization, of vision, and of faith. On one side stood the Achaemenid Empire, the largest and most organized power the world had ever seen, ruled by the great king who believed himself chosen by divine order. On the other stood the fractious Greek city-states, small but fierce, united only by defiance. Between them stretched a line of blood, bronze, and fire. It was in this crucible of conflict that the legend of the Persian death ray took on flesh. By the time Xerxes ascended the throne, Persia had already endured humiliation at Marathon. Greek arrows had pierced the myth of invincibility, and the empire's pride demanded retribution. Preparations for invasion became an empire-wide mobilization, roads filled with soldiers, engineers, and scholars. Royal edicts commanded the gathering of resources, not only for war but for innovation. The king's engineers, artisans, and alchemists were summoned to experiment with devices that might give Persia the edge it needed. Within secret workshops, they studied light and fire, metals and mixtures, seeking to conjure the divine weapon rumored to exist, the mirror that could burn ships, the light that could blind armies. The invasion of Greece in 480 BCE was a spectacle of overwhelming power. Over 200,000 men marched under banners that glittered in the sun, and the fleet that followed was a floating city of war. Among them were the empire's finest engineers, men who could build bridges across seas and channel rivers. Their task was not only logistical but experimental. Some accounts describe towers of shining bronze erected along the Persian encampments, structures whose purpose baffled later historians. Were they simply signal stations or something more? A few modern scholars propose that these may have served as platforms for optical experiments, perhaps to test the focusing of sunlight over distance. When the Persian fleet met the Greeks at Artemisium, the sea became a mirror of chaos. Accounts from later Greek sources describe an eerie phenomenon: ships that caught fire before the enemy drew near, light flashing across the water like lightning. These descriptions are often dismissed as poetic exaggeration, yet the timing aligns with the empire's known interest in fire weapons. Could the Persians have attempted to deploy a reflective weapon, even in primitive form? Under perfect sunlight, an array of burnished shields or mounted mirrors could, at least momentarily, focus light on oiled Greek sails or tarred decks. The heat alone may not have destroyed ships outright, but it could have sparked panic, a weapon of confusion more than destruction. For Xerxes, war was not only about conquest but symbolism. Every act of aggression was meant to display divine sanction. A weapon that used the sun, the very embodiment of Ahura Mazda's fire, would have been a perfect statement of divine favor. Soldiers might have seen its flash as proof that the heavens themselves fought for Persia. Greek chroniclers, ever wary of Persian mysticism, would later record it as a terrifying, godlike spectacle. To the Persians, it was not merely technology, it was theology in motion. But the death ray, if it truly existed in any form, faced the same enemy that has always haunted innovators: the limits of the possible. The sea was unpredictable, sunlight fickle, and precision fragile under chaos. Even if the device worked under ideal conditions, the realities of battle, movement, smoke, and fear would have rendered it unreliable. Perhaps it dazzled, perhaps it burned, but it could not turn the tide. The Greeks held their ground at Artemisium, and later, at Salamis, the Persian fleet met its ruin. As ships burned and men drowned, Persia's great weapon faded into obscurity. Its creators, who had promised victory through brilliance, now faced the wrath of a king betrayed by his own ambition. In the aftermath, whispers of failure spread through the court. Some claimed the mirrors had cracked under the heat of the sun, others that the alchemist's fires had turned against their own men. What was once a symbol of divine power became a mark of hubris. The emotional heart of this moment lies in tragedy, an empire of immense genius undone not by ignorance, but by overreach. The Persians had dreamed of mastering light itself, but in doing so, they courted forces they could not fully control. The war that was supposed to prove their supremacy instead became a lesson in humility. Greece, small and divided, had withstood the greatest army on earth, while Persia's grand inventions vanished into rumor. Yet even in defeat, the story of the death ray refused to die. It lingered in memory, carried by traders, scholars, and soldiers, transforming from failed experiment into myth. The Persian engineers who once served kings would be remembered not as scientists, but as sorcerers. Their mirrors became relics of superstition, their fire a curse from the gods. And as history turned, the story of the death ray became more legend than record, a tale of brilliance scorched by its own light. But this was not the end. For in the ashes of Persia's defeat, the seeds of rediscovery were sown. Centuries later, those same stories would reach the ears of new scholars, men who would try once again to summon the sun's fire, and in doing so, resurrect the mystery that had begun under Xerxes' burning sky. The weapon that promised to reshape war had disappeared, but its echo endured, waiting for the world to be ready to understand it. After Persia's defeat in Greece, the empire turned inward, haunted by its own failed genius. The weapon that once promised divine power, the death ray, became a symbol of shame. In Persepolis, royal engineers faced suspicion and fear. Xerxes, desperate to find order amid chaos, demanded answers for his shattered navy and burned pride. Whispers spread of fires that disobeyed their masters, of mirror towers that accidentally set Persian ships aflame. Whether truth or rumor, the story symbolized everything Persia feared: mankind's attempt to command the light of the gods. The Magi, guardians of sacred fire, condemned the engineers for sacrilege. What had once been divine science was now heresy. The king ordered the workshops dismantled, the designs sealed in archives or destroyed outright. In the quiet corridors of Persepolis, the mirrors were smashed, their fragments reflecting only the dim glow of torches. The men who had reached too far into heaven vanished, executed, exiled, or forgotten. And yet, even in ruin, their legend endured. Reliefs from the late Achaemenid period show strange discs carved beside flames, relics of forbidden brilliance disguised as holy symbols. The death ray had become both curse and secret, a warning engraved in stone. Persia's downfall mirrored that of its weapon, magnificent, visionary, and undone by hubris. Its rulers had sought to control light and instead were consumed by it. But fire leaves traces. Beneath the ashes of Persepolis, buried fragments of bronze may still gleam, waiting for the day when human ambition dares once again to summon the sun. Centuries later, the death ray's legend resurfaced through whispers in dusty manuscripts. Arab and Persian scholars of the Islamic Golden Age inherited fragments of the old empire's genius. Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, and Ibn al-Haytham explored light, reflection, and geometry with renewed curiosity. What had once been condemned as sorcery became a science, optics. The old dream of commanding light was reborn, now framed not as divine punishment but as divine understanding. As these works were translated into Latin, Europe rediscovered ancient optics. Renaissance thinkers like Roger Bacon and Athanasius Kircher speculated on sun mirrors and burning arrays, echoing the Persian ideal of light as power. Though they credited Archimedes for the concept, some suspected the origins were far older, born not in Greece but in the East. In the modern era, experiments rekindled the myth. Engineers tested bronze mirrors under the sun and confirmed that concentrated light could ignite wood, just as the ancient tales described. The 1973 experiment by Ioannis Sakas proved the physics behind the story plausible. Whether or not the Persians truly achieved it, their ambition had been real, centuries ahead of its time. The rediscovery phase turned legend into mirror. Scientists saw themselves reflected in those long-lost inventors, visionaries balancing wonder and danger. The Persian Death Ray came to represent the timeless human pursuit of mastery over nature, the merging of intellect and imagination. In resurrecting their legend, we rediscovered our own, a reminder that innovation is never lost, only buried, waiting for minds brave enough to uncover it. The Persian Death Ray endures not as a weapon, but as a symbol of humanity's hunger to wield light itself. Across millennia, its legend has transformed from myth to metaphor, from divine fire to scientific pursuit. The Persians dreamed of mastering the sun. Today, humanity bends photons into lasers, plasma, and solar energy. Every new invention reflects that same desire to control the elemental forces that shape existence. But the Death Ray's true lesson lies beyond technology. It is a warning wrapped in brilliance, a reminder that the boundary between enlightenment and destruction is razor-thin. The Persians believed light was sacred truth. When they tried to weaponize it, their empire dimmed. Modern civilization repeats that paradox with every discovery that can heal or annihilate, illuminate or blind. Still, the story carries hope. The courage of those ancient minds, their refusal to accept limitation, survives in every scientist who dares to question the impossible. The Death Ray's fire was not extinguished, it evolved. It burns now in telescopes studying the cosmos, in solar panels harvesting the same energy once worshipped as divine. As the camera fades over the ruins of Persepolis, the sunlight glints off broken stone, a flicker of bronze buried in dust. Perhaps those mirrors still lie beneath the desert, waiting for a brighter dawn. Their light is no longer a threat, but a reflection of human potential, our eternal struggle to understand, to create, and to rise, even when it burns.